Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for the Creator Press Conference with the visionary director, Gareth Edwards.
Oh, so I thought you were talking about someone else then. Cheers. Okay.
Hi, Gareth. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Thanks for doing this.
Excellent. Well, I'm Jamie Graham from Total Film Magazine, and I'm going to be the moderator today. We have loads to talk about, as you'd imagine, with an amazing film like this. And we're going to get to the questions from the other 200 journalists we have with us today very soon. So, guys, if you have any questions at all for Gareth, please submit them to the Q&A function on Zoom. Make sure to include your name, your outlet, so we know who's asking the question, and we will get to those shortly. But first of all, I'm going to kick off, Gareth, with just a few questions to get the ball rolling. And I want to start right at the beginning that this was an original story that you wrote with Chris Weitz, which I believe in 2020 you guys started it. So can you tell me how it came about?
Yeah, and also Hossein Amini was also a writer on the movie.
Ah,
I There are lots of ways of trying to explain where the idea came from. The most unique one, which I remember very clearly, was that I just finished Star Wars. I needed a bit of a break, and we decided with my girlfriend that we were going to go and see her parents who live in Iowa, which is like the other side of America. And we're like, okay, we'll do like a 4-day road trip. And the great thing about having finished a movie is your brain sort of like deletes, like formats the hard drive, and suddenly you've got this
right.
like blank canvas. And I wasn't expecting to think about the next film or get any ideas, but I just put some headphones on, I was looking out the window, and we went through this like tall grass sort of farmland area, and there was this factory that went by, and it had what looked like a Japanese logo on it. And I thought, just because the way I'm wired, like in science fiction, I was like, I wonder what they're doing in there. Like, oh, maybe it's robots or something cool. Like, I doubt it. It's like the Midwest. But and then I was thinking, oh, imagine being a robot built in a factory, and you step outside the factory for the first time, and like all you've ever seen is inside this building, and then suddenly you see grass and the trees and the sky, and like what would that feel like? And I thought, oh, that's a cool little moment in a film, but I don't know what that would be. And I threw it away and carried on thinking about other things, but it kept coming back the rest of the trip. And I was like, oh, you know what that could be? It could be, and I started building on the idea. And by the time we got to my girlfriend's parents' house, I kind of had the basics of the whole movie mapped out, which is really rare. Normally, you sit like painfully for like a year trying to get a movie sort of in your head. And so I was like, oh, maybe there's something in this, and maybe this should be the next film.
So you kind of touched on this, Gareth, but this is a film that's shot in several countries, like 7 or 8 countries all around the globe. Now, tell us about that. Why did you choose to do that, and what does that bring to a film in terms of the creative benefits and in terms of the obstacles, the challenges?
Um, it's mainly all benefits, I think, in that. So normally when you make a film like this, what happens is you design the world, you do all these cool pieces of artwork, you show a studio. They say you'll never find anywhere that looks like this. You're going to have to build it in a soundstage. It's going to cost $200 million, and you'll shoot it against green screen. And we were like, no, 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 no. Like, forget the literal images. This is just the idea. We'll design it based on whatever we actually film. So we'll do all the design like when we finish the movie, like we'd sort of make the movie in reverse. And so we ended up saying like, let us go make the film. We sort of picked, if you get this crew small enough,
Mm,
the cost of the crew is so little that it's cheaper to fly them anywhere in the world than it is to build a set. And so suddenly the idea of like picking every single best location based on the scene became a reality. And so we cherry picked like the volcanoes of Indonesia, uh, Buddhist temples in the Himalayas, ruins of Cambodia and floating villages and all this. Went to 8 different countries and shot the movie like a lot more like an independent film to some extent.
yeah,
And then when it was all finished, we had, a big chunk of the budget for Industrial Light and Magic and some other vendors to kind of basically, we edited the film, got frames from each shot in the movie, gave them to the production designer and the concept artist. And what normally happens a year and a half earlier was then happening during the edit. And they were
right.
painting and designing all the sci-fi just on the shots we were actually using. So you never paint to the left or the right of the frame. So everything's really efficient. You only use what you see, and so yeah, it was everything that I think that I like about the movie is a result of doing it differently. And so I just feel like super excited. Like it feels like I never want to go back to the other way of making a film, basically.
Yeah. Yeah. Because at one point you actually went up the Himalayas, didn't you? And it was just you, John David Washington, and I think the producer, and no one else, not even a sound man. It was completely guerrilla stuff.
Yeah, we didn't, much to the annoyance of who wanted to have a holiday in Nepal. We didn't take the sound crew for that little shoot because it was so remote. Everything in
Mm,
that village has to travel, like be carried by hand for 4 days.
wow.
We flew in on a helicopter, thankfully, um, and so yeah, so it was we were there for about 3 days, and it was I think over 10,000 feet. So you got like altitude sickness and things like that, which was a bit surreal. But yeah, and everyone in the movie is actually villagers from the little village by the like the Buddhist temple. And
Wow.
some of the kids agreed to shave their heads and play some of the robot monks and AI and stuff. It was kind of surreal. Like you think there's going to be a problem, but they all get really excited about being like in a Hollywood blockbuster.
I bet. I bet. Now, obviously, science fiction, you've always been a fan since you were a kid. You've made some great sci-fi movies already. What is it about science fiction in terms of it can explore real questions, can't it? Kind of big questions that confront society and we all worry about. And you can almost do it at one step removed with a science fiction film. I mean, why do you think that is, and why does it appeal to you so much?
I think it's probably two main reasons. I'm not sure. One of them is like growing up with Star Wars and
Yeah.
being promised this amazing world with spaceships and robots, and then you kind of realize it's not true and that's not going to happen. And so the second best thing is like I'll become a liar like George Lucas, and I'll create these like stories for kids to grow up with. But then the other main reason is my favorite TV show growing up was The Twilight Zone, the Rod Serling black and white TV show.
Brilliant. Yeah.
And what's so good about those stories is they change one aspect of real life. Like you can live your whole life and have certain set beliefs. They never really get challenged because nothing really
Mm,
happens out of the ordinary. And so you think, everything or everything you believe about the world is correct, and you can live and die and have the same views the entire time. But when you change some aspect of the world to be like an extreme, like one element just gets flipped on its head, whatever it may be, you suddenly realize a lot of the things you thought were true start to not work and be wrong. And it makes you
yeah.
question like what your beliefs are. And I think that's the best kind of science fiction. And so like we were using AI as a kind of metaphor for people who are different to yourself. And
Mm.
that's how it started. But then obviously, in the last year or so, it's become quite a reality, and it's gotten very surreal.
Very much so. So, final question for me, then I'm going to hand over to our friends in the audience. But this is a film with incredible visuals. It's got suspense, it's intense, but obviously, it's also got a core emotional story, which is so vital to the film. I mean, all of your movies are emotional, or they have that kind of heartfelt element to them. Again, why is that so important to you? And tell us about it in this film.
Um, I don't know. I think essentially, like the film that probably had one of the biggest impacts on me is as a kid was Steven Spielberg's E.T.
Yeah,
And as a kid, I went in, all I was interested in is I wanted to see an alien and a spaceship, and BMXs. And
yeah,
then I got absolutely moved to tears on this like emotional journey with the two of them. And I feel like that's the goal. Every movie you make, you don't say this out loud because you set yourself up for failure. But like if you don't make, some people well up or cry, then you're not
mm,
really abusing like the power of cinema. And so like it's always the secret goal when you write a film is to do something that affects people emotionally. But yeah, I mean, it's up for other people to say if you were successful or not, I guess.
yeah, yeah. Brilliant. Well, I'm going to hand over. First of all, we've got a question from Ashley Saunders from With Ashley and Co. Madeline was incredible in the film. Can you share a little bit about her audition and what it was that made you say, yes, this is our Alfie?
It was very, very simple because she was as strong in the audition as she was in the movie. But essentially, we did an open casting call for like hundreds of kids around the world, sent in tapes. It was during the pandemic, and then they got it down to show me like, I don't know, 100 or 200 videos of kids, and then selected, like, eventually it took a while, but we got to like a top 10. And then I met with them, and I was sort of paranoid because I knew this was going to be a crazy situation. We were going to the jungles of Thailand. It was going to be really hot. It was going to test whichever family, like naively agreed to do this film. And so we actually met at Universal Studios so we could go around the theme park a little bit and see what the
Brilliant.
family dynamic was like, to check everyone was okay. And the first person I met with happened to be Madeline, and she came in, she did this scene, and we were just like trying not to cry. It was like so emotional and brilliant. And I just thought, okay, this is too good to be true. Maybe the mum has played a trick on her. Maybe she told her something just before she came in, and I got paranoid that it was a one-off thing and it would never happen again. And so, like, a bit
Mm,
cheekily at the end, I was like, hey, do you mind just playing around and we just like make something up? So I invented this other scene, and she did something even more like heart grabbing, and I was just like, okay, this is it, this is our kid, you know.
yeah. Well, it's a phenomenal performance. Phenomenal. So we go over, we've now got Jesus Lugo Suarez from El Geraldo, Colombia. AI is everywhere now, and discussions about the ethics of these systems have already begun. When did you start conceptualizing the idea, and what is your point of view on it, considering it's a crucial point in the movie?
Yeah, so I started writing this in 2018 when AI was up there with flying cars and living on the moon. It was like something
Yeah.
that maybe you would see in your lifetime, probably not. Um, and so I sort of feel like every major technological breakthrough that's happened in the last century or so, like electricity,
Yeah.
computers, the internet, of course, they always have seismic like changes on industries, and they're very sort of they do, like, there's a big bump in the road that we have to get over, but on the other side of it, when the dust finally settles, um I think we all look back and go, I'm glad we have electricity, I'm glad we have computers, I'm glad we have the internet. And I think this will be another one, like, it's the next things in the world that I think that positives are going to outweigh the negatives. And I say that because when the robo-apocalypse actually happens, they'll have this recording and they'll know, and I'll be like left, I won't be enslaved like you guys. So
Yeah, exactly. We're all going to go Terminator 2 Judgment Day, and you'll be the only one left. So Tessa Smith from Mama's Geeky says you've made such a beautiful film, such an intriguing world in the creator. Do you have any ideas for future films, or do you see this as a solo story? So I think she means sequels to the creator.
yeah, no, I it's funny because whenever I get a bit of free time and you sort of think you want to sit and watch something, I always end up in arguments with my girlfriend. She wants to watch TV shows,
Hmm.
like,
Yeah,
binge watch something on streaming, and I want to watch films, and we can never agree. And she's like, "Why don't you want to watch TV? You never watch TV shows. What is it?" And I had to think about it because I was like, "What is my problem?" And then I sort of realized, like, I really like endings. Like,
hmm,
that's the best. My favorite part of a story is when it is how it ends, and it's like this mic drop moment. It's like the best part of a joke is the punchline, and so when I'm trying to figure out a story, I'm always working backwards from the end to try and get it to be this climax as much as possible, and everything
yeah,
sort of leads to that moment. And so this is self-contained. Like, I didn't, as much as I love the world that it all exists in, and it was amazing to sort of design and build everything and shoot it all over in these beautiful countries, but it'd be a high class problem to have the studio come up and tap you on the shoulder and say, hey, Gareth, you got to think of something, we need a sequel or something. But I really, that's not on my agenda. I'm not really interested in doing that. It's a one-off movie, you know. So fingers crossed.
So when this film is a huge hit, we'll see you in 2 years' time on the creator team.
Totally, I'll be totally retracting that. I did I say that? Oh no, it was always intended to be a trilogy.
Of course, right from the get-go. Okay, Hunter Boldin from that hashtag show says, where did the influence for some of the vehicle designs in the movie come from? The rolling US tanks look awesome. Fully agreed with Hunter on that one.
Thanks. So we, James Klein, who is our production designer, should take credit for a lot of that. We sort of we wanted to put a tank in the movie that felt like something that should be in an anime film, like one of these like futuristic, crazy, over the top tanks. But if you just scale up a tank, it doesn't look very exciting. And so it was like trying to create negative space and cut things out where it still retains the basics of a tank, but has a shape you wouldn't expect. And we always wanted, our secret hope was that we wanted Bandai, which is the company who make all the toy models of manga and anime characters. We wanted Bandai to release this as a model kit one day, and so we'd actually take Bandai boxes off the internet and put our tank on it to see if it felt like
Brilliant.
something. If we were in the store, we'd go, "Oh my god, I got to get that!" And until we got really excited and jealous and wanted to buy this toy, we kept going until it looked right. So
I imagine you were like that as a kid, Gareth. You probably had every Star Wars like figure,
I
all
wasn't
of that.
allowed everyone. I had to.
Oh,
No, my friend had all the Star Wars figures, and we'd always go around his house and play Star Wars when I was a kid.
good man. Good man. Okay, Emily Hewitt from D23 says, how does Joshua's empathy for Elfie shape the narrative of the story?
Well, I don't want to give too much away, but a lot of people, when they view stories, they view them as straight lines, like a beginning, middle, and end, like a train track.
Yeah,
And I always like to view them as a circle, like you're kind of like a clock. You're going round, you're orbiting something on this journey. And so, what I find really useful about that is essentially your character, as they travel through the film, does like a 180-degree U-turn, and so they basically get the opportunity to see things from a completely different perspective because of the situation they've been put in. And I think that's one of the great things about storytelling, whether it be novels or cinema or whatever, is that you're able, whatever the audience's preconceptions is, you're able to show them different perspectives and see things from other points of view. And like any baddie, whoever you cast in a movie as the bad guy, the
mm,
first question they're going to have to you as an actor is, they don't see themselves as the bad guy. They're the good guy, and everyone else is bad. And so they want to
yeah,
sort of find the justification. And so you do that with everything. And AI, the characters who are AI in this film, have to see themselves as the good guys and that we're the bad guys.
yeah,
And as soon as you start really figuring that out, it gets really interesting, and you're like, oh, this has to be in the film, and we have to
yeah,
explore it. And so yeah.
definitely. Okay, Rob Wainfer from the Bearded Trio wants to know a little bit about the lightweight cameras that you use. You talk about them in the production notes. So, how much freedom did they give you? And do you think it would become a kind of industry standard going forward to free yourself up with these cameras?
I hope it becomes an industry standard for cameras to get lighter. I don't think there's any cameraman in the world that enjoys holding this really heavy brick for hours on end. I'm a bit of a wimp, so I was looking for a very lightweight, small camera, and it just so happened that um, just as we started filming about a year before, things got really interesting with camera technology. And for anyone who remembers film in a camera, I don't know if you remember, but the way they measured the sensitivity to light, it was like 100 ISO or 200 ISO. And if
Right.
you're in an interior space that was a little dark, you'd have an 800 ISO. Well, these new cameras shoot at 12,800 ISO. And so you
Well,
can basically film in moonlight. And so the second you can do things like that, we're all familiar with LED lights, right? At home, like battery things, even your phone is pretty bright. It's like, so basically lights now are so bright and the cameras are so sensitive, you don't need all these giant cranes and lighting. And so just like you have on set, someone holding a pole with the microphone, we thought let's have someone with a pole and a light. And that way, as the actors are given freedom to sort of go any direction they want, and I can quickly move with them, the lighting can quickly change in an instant. And so instead of waiting 10, 20 minutes to change the lighting all the time, we were waiting 3 seconds. And so we did like 30-minute takes where we wouldn't stop for 30 minutes and got all this material as a result, I think that's very naturalistic at times, very
Mm, mm,
organic, and doesn't feel like your average blockbuster, which I think really helps all the science fiction of it all.
yeah. So Margaret Gardner from the Sunday Times in South Africa wants to know all about John David Washington, who she says is an incredible talent. Completely true. So why did you choose John David Washington? And tell us about his scenes, especially with the child, what he does that makes them so special.
Um, I mean, JD's basically got um, that's the problem you can get into, I think, with these kind of films is if you don't have if you're not on the same page as your lead actor, there's a tendency in this kind of movie to become a tough guy. You know what I mean? You're the hero, and you've got to like, you never show any like weakness and all this sort of stuff. And I'm not really into those films, or they don't, I never feel like any vulnerability for the character is always going to be fine. And so I wanted to see cracks in the armor, and JD had done a whole bunch of films um, where like I wanted a moment in the film where when people left the room and it's just him, he's not okay. Like,
Yeah,
no, whether he cries or whatever, but he is broken. And around other people, he acts fine, but it's all putting on a front like a lot of people, we all do to some extent. And so I wanted an actor that wasn't afraid to go there like that, and he was really into that idea. And then him and Madeline, um, we both agreed that the most important thing on the film when the camera wasn't rolling is that Madeline and him became best friends. And Madeline's a very quiet, shy girl. Like it's really hard to become her friend. Like I tried the entire movie, and I think she let me a little bit in, but not fully. But JD like cracked the code and became like a big brother to her and her best friend. And it was so sweet because like you'd finish a take, and you know how actors are in a zone and they got a certain mindset, and they basically walk into the corner of the room. They don't want to be bothered by anyone. They're trying to keep in that headspace
yeah.
before you do this next take. Well, he would go over in the corner and do that, and she would just jump off, run after him, hold his hand, and like start talking about a toy she really likes at home, that she was playing with or something.
Sure.
And he's such a sweetheart. He'd, go down to her level and start like getting really excited about what she was saying, and they were inseparable. It was, and I purposefully saved certain scenes in the movie to the end of the shoot so that they would, you know, said too much, but
Yeah,
it's a very emotional performance.
yeah, yeah. We'll leave it there. So Ron from POC Culture says, what inspired the decision to set up the story as America versus New Asia?
Yeah, I mean, I did actually try lots of different permutations like Europe and South America, and it just became the most simple, clearest way to split the world into. And I had been on holiday as a little kid to Asia, and it sort of blew my mind. And one of the big tricks that I think George Lucas did so well, and I sort of learned a lot from Star Wars when we were doing that, was that he takes things from that, like the distant past, like spirituality, religious stories, mythology, and then puts them with things in the far future, like spaceships and robots. And there's
Yeah,
nothing in between. It's literally like the far past, far future, and they kind of like wedges them together. And more than anywhere else in the world, I think where that happens the most is in like Southeast Asia. Like you essentially end up in these places like Hong Kong or Bangkok or Tokyo, where you're in like a metropolis that looks like something from Blade Runner. But if you just go down that street and take a left, there's a little temple and a Buddhist monk. And I love those polar opposites, those visual contrasts. They kind of
yeah,
they feel, I don't know, I just find them super exciting. Like there's sort of energy in that, like a battery, like a positive and a negative in it. And
yeah.
you're always looking for that as a filmmaker in story and visuals and every aspect.
because you also just happened upon like old vehicles, didn't you? Like mopeds from the 1970s and kind of incorporated that into your
Yeah,
future world.
there's like people in the movie that don't know they're in the film. Like, it's not ruining it, but there's a shot. I just stuck a camera out the van when we were driving somewhere because I kept noticing these amazing people on motorbikes, just like they call them bikes of burden, where they're just carrying all these like farm products, and fruit and stuff to the market. And and I was like, I was trying to get someone like just, and every bike would go past and it wouldn't quite be right. And this one guy just came into shop perfectly, and he was on a moped and he had a big massive bunch of bananas on the back. And I was just so excited because I was like, I'm gonna make that guy a robot, because there's like something really weird about a robot driving a moped, taking bananas somewhere. Like, what is he doing? Like, what's going on there? And that's, I wanted this movie to have so many things in it where you go, what is that? Who is that? Where are they go? And you ask loads of questions and you don't know the answer. Because if you really went to 2070 or the far future and shot a movie and then brought it back, there'd be so many things you wouldn't understand. You know what I mean? You're not supposed to understand them. It's kind of what makes it feel kind of believable.
Yeah, yeah. Sarah Wolowski from Skywalking Through Neverland asks, what were your notes to composer Hans Zimmer and team when scoring AI folk versus the American Army?
Um, One of the reoccurring notes that we sort of joked about, was I didn't want poor man Zimmer, is what I called it, where Hans's music, basically when you edit a film, when you make a movie, you steal music from other composers and as like a temp track. And then when you cut it all together, you then give it to your composer, and they have to listen to all these other composers' musics, and then usually go, oh, we're not going to do anything like that. I'm going to do my own thing. It's going to be like really original. And but everyone always steals from Hans Zimmer typically, and so you get all these other composers having to like imitate Hans, and I
Mm.
jokingly called it poor man's Zimmer. And and so and to me that was like music that's like, like, and I was like, can't have any of that in the movie. I really want it to feel like if someone played this soundtrack not knowing anything, they might not guess it was Hans Zimmer. And obviously that's music to their ears, excuse the pun, but they loved that. And so our influences were things like actually like Bach and Mozart for the West. And then we took those themes that they had written, and then they used instrumentation from Asia and had them earlier in the movie. So you sort of learn the theme subconsciously, and then you hear it in its glory later in the film.
Oh, that's absolutely great. Okay, Lan Ribeiro from Art Cult Brazil says, you mentioned that you view the movie not as a play but as a dream. It's a statement that I found quite beautiful. Could you talk a bit about the elements that served as the foundation for the project?
Um, yeah, I guess that's when I was talking about that. I I think the problem is when you write a script. My favorite moments in cinema, or like really cinematic moments, whatever they may be, if you read the screenplay for those movies, those moments wouldn't stand out on the page. They're things that are like non-verbal, like music and sound design and cinematography, and it gives you goosebumps, but on a screenplay, it's just another moment. It doesn't come across like
Yeah,
great. What works really well in screenplays is people kind of arguing or having clever banter, conflict with each other in dialogue, like a stage play. And and so I don't personally, I'm not a fan of screenplays as like the foundation for the film, because it doesn't capture like most of the reasons I want to make the movie. And so one of the things I do at the very beginning is I just create like a visual bible. So for each scene in the movie, there's just a stack of imagery that's like, this is what this scene is going to feel like. And then there's music. I create a playlist of music, and this is the music I'd like to use for this section of the film, stuff like that. And it's actually, I find it's more useful when bringing people on to, I just dump them all that material, and they suddenly go, oh, okay, I get it now. But like just scripts on their own, quite limiting, I think, for like being uh the proof of concept of something that's a very audio visual experience.
yeah. Well, unfortunately, our 30 minutes are up, Gareth. That's gone in the blink of an eye. So I'd
Yeah.
just like to thank you for attending, obviously, and for your marvelous answers, and for all the other journalists for attending and for their questions. And just to remind everyone, the movie is out in theatres next Friday, 29th of September. So thank you very much, everyone, for your time. Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Jamie. Thanks.